You know, there are moments in life that stop us dead in our tracks. Moments that make us question everything we thought we knew about strength and courage. The day we lost Chadwick Boseman was one of those moments, because here was a man who fought his hardest battles in complete silence, who gave us some of his most powerful performances while facing down his own mortality. Let me tell you something about courage. It's not about the absence of fear. It's about what you do when fear is sitting right there beside you, whispering all those doubts in your ear. Chadwick knew this truth better than most. While the world saw him don the mantle of kings and legends, he was quietly writing his own legend, one of unimaginable resilience. Consider this. Every time he stepped onto a set, every scene he filmed, every interview he gave, he was carrying a weight that would crush most spirits. Yet there he was, standing tall, bringing Jackie Robinson's determination, James Brown's fire, and T'Challa's dignity to life. Not because it was easy, but because something deeper than fear was driving him. You see, what Chadwick Boseman showed us wasn't just how to act or how to be a superhero on screen. He showed us something far more valuable: how to live with purpose when life itself becomes uncertain. The ancient Stoics had a term for this kind of courage: amor fati, the love of fate, even its harshest moments. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because this story isn't just about one man's battle. It's about understanding how we all can face our own fears, our own uncertainties, with the same kind of grace and determination that Chadwick showed us. Welcome to Rise Stoically, where we explore the timeless wisdom of Stoic philosophy through the lives of those who embodied its principles, sometimes without even knowing it. We're not here for surface-level inspiration. We're here to dig deep into the real, practical wisdom that can transform how we face life's greatest challenges. In this channel, we bring ancient wisdom to modern challenges, showing you how the principles that guided great minds thousands of years ago are just as relevant today. Whether you're facing personal struggles, professional challenges, or just trying to make sense of life's complexities, you'll find practical wisdom here that you can apply right now. What we're about to explore together isn't just another story about celebrity courage. No, this is about understanding how one man's journey can illuminate the path for all of us. Through Chadwick Boseman's life and legacy, we'll uncover 5 timeless principles of Stoic resilience that can transform how you face your own battles. You'll learn how to cultivate the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself to the world. We'll explore what it means to create lasting impact while facing impermanence, and how to find purpose in life's greatest challenges. But most importantly, you'll discover how to turn philosophy into action, just as Chadwick did every single day of his final years. Principle 1, the power of hidden strength. You know, there's something profound about strength that doesn't need to announce itself. The kind of strength that works quietly, persistently, away from the spotlight. Chadwick Boseman embodied this principle in a way that even the ancient Stoics would have deeply admired. Consider this. For 4 years, while he was bringing to life some of the most physically demanding roles in his career, Boseman was undergoing chemotherapy and multiple surgeries. Let that sink in for a moment. While the world saw T'Challa performing incredible stunts in Black Panther, Boseman was fighting a private battle that would have brought most of us to our knees. Now here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't just about keeping a medical condition private. This was about something the Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught centuries ago. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Boseman didn't just understand this principle, he lived it to its fullest expression. Let me tell you something about true strength. It's not in what you proclaim to the world. It's in what you do when you think no one is watching. When Boseman was asked about his apparent weight loss during this period, he didn't seek sympathy or special consideration. Instead, he remained focused on the work, on the impact he could still create, on the stories he could still tell. The Stoics had a concept called inner citadel, that private space within ourselves where our true strength resides. Boseman built his inner citadel not through grand declarations or public displays of courage, but through quiet, consistent action. Even as his body was being ravaged by cancer and treatments, he visited children's hospitals, children who were fighting similar battles. Think about that. Here was a man who could have justifiably turned inward, focused solely on his own struggle, yet he chose to be a source of strength for others. And that brings us to the profound truth about hidden strength. It's not about what you endure. It's about how you use your endurance to serve something greater than yourself. Boseman didn't just keep his struggle private to maintain his career. He did it to ensure that the impact of his work, particularly the significance of Black Panther for millions of people around the world, wouldn't be overshadowed by his personal battle. When was the last time you faced a challenge and chose to focus not on the weight of your burden, but on the possibility of your impact? Consider how your own struggles, kept private or shared, can become a source of strength, not just for yourself, but for others who might be watching, learning, drawing inspiration from how you face your battles. Principle 2. Embracing mortality as a compass. You know what most people do when they face their own mortality? They freeze. They let the fear of death become a shadow that dims everything else in their life. But Chadwick, he did something remarkable. He turned that awareness into fuel for living more purposefully, and in doing so, he embodied one of the most profound teachings of Stoic philosophy. Let me tell you something about the ancient Stoics. They had this practice called memento mori, the meditation on death. Not to be morbid, mind you, but to use death as a clarifying force in life. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Now here's where Chadwick's story becomes particularly profound, because he didn't just understand this principle, he alchemized it into pure gold. Consider this. In the 4 years after his diagnosis, Boseman didn't just continue acting. He chose roles that would matter, stories that needed to be told. From T'Challa to Thurgood Marshall, from Jackie Robinson to Stormin Norman in Dar 5 Bloods. Each character he portrayed carried a weight of history, a message that would outlive him. That's not coincidence, folks. That's a man who understood that his time was limited and chose to make every moment count. You see, there's a particular scene in Black Panther where T'Challa visits the ancestral plane and speaks with his father. The line goes, "A man who has not prepared his children for his own death has failed as a father." Watching that scene now, knowing what we know, it takes on a whole new meaning, because Chadwick wasn't just delivering lines, he was living this truth, preparing a legacy that would speak to generations. And that brings us to something deeper. When you truly accept mortality, not just intellectually but in your bones, it changes how you move through the world. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that to live with death is to live with full appreciation of life's impermanence. Boseman knew his days were numbered, yet watch any of his interviews from that period. You won't see despair. Instead, you'll see a man fully present, fully engaged, often smiling, because he understood what the Stoics taught. The length of a life is less important than its depth. Now here's where it gets interesting. During the filming of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, his final role, Boseman was at his physically weakest, but those who worked with him described performances of incredible power. Denzel Washington said he'd never seen anything like it. That's what happens when someone fully embraces their mortality. They don't become less alive, they become more alive than ever. The ancient Stoics believed that contemplating death wasn't about being morbid or fatalistic. It was about gaining clarity. When you know your time is finite, you stop wasting it on things that don't matter. You focus on what's essential. For Chadwick, that meant using his platform to tell stories that would challenge and change how people think about race, justice, and heroism. The power of this principle isn't in knowing you're going to die. We all know that. It's in letting that knowledge transform how you live. Chadwick didn't let his diagnosis become his story. Instead, he used whatever time he had to tell stories that would ripple through generations. He showed us that facing mortality doesn't mean surrendering to it. It means using it as a compass to guide you toward what truly matters. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you knew your time was limited? The truth is, it already is. We all carry that same knowledge Chadwick did. We just get better at ignoring it. But imagine living each day with that same clarity of purpose, that same commitment to making your time count. That's not about being morbid. It's about being alive in the fullest sense of the word. Principle 3, finding purpose in pain. There's a moment, a moment when pain either breaks you or becomes your teacher. The Stoics understood this. They had a saying, "The obstacle is the way." But let me tell you something about how Chadwick Boseman elevated this principle to an art form, transforming his personal struggle into a masterclass in purpose-driven living. You see, during his most challenging days of treatment, when most would have retreated from the world, Boseman was on set, bringing Black Panther to life. Now here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't just about being tough or pushing through pain. This was about understanding that sometimes our greatest purpose reveals itself through our deepest struggles. The Stoics called this concept amor fati, the love of fate, even its harshest moments. Consider this. Every time he stepped onto that set, every scene he filmed while battling cancer, he was doing more than acting. He was creating something that would give hope and representation to millions of people, particularly young black children who had never seen themselves as superheroes before. The pain he endured became part of a larger purpose, a transformation that the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius would have recognized when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." There's a particular story about Boseman visiting St. Jude's Children's Hospital while he was undergoing his own chemotherapy. Think about that for a moment. Here was a man carrying his own immense burden, choosing to spend his energy lifting others up. When asked about these visits later, he broke down in tears, remembering two young boys who were fighting cancer, who told him they were trying to hold on just long enough to see Black Panther. Those boys never knew that the man encouraging them was fighting the same battle they were. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it is because we do not dare that things are difficult." Boseman lived this truth in every frame of film he shot during those 4 years. When asked about the physical demands of his roles during this period, he would often deflect the conversation to the importance of the story being told. That's the essence of finding purpose in pain, seeing beyond your personal struggle to the larger impact you can have. You know what's remarkable? The way Boseman's understanding of his purpose seemed to deepen as his challenges grew. While filming Marshall, Dar 5 Bloods, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, he wasn't just pushing through pain, he was transforming it into performances that would become part of his legacy. Each role became a vessel for something greater than himself, each character a vehicle for telling stories that needed to be told. During the filming of 42, where he portrayed Jackie Robinson, Boseman was already experiencing the early symptoms of his illness. Yet he chose to focus on the larger significance of Robinson's story, the breaking of baseball's color barrier, rather than his own discomfort. As he said in an interview, "The story is bigger than me, it's bigger than any individual. That's what happens when you find purpose in pain. Your personal struggle becomes fuel for something transcendent." And that brings us to the heart of this principle. Pain, when met with purpose, becomes more than just suffering. It becomes a crucible for transformation. The Stoics understood this. They taught that it's not what happens to us that matters most, but what we do with what happens to us. Boseman took this teaching and showed us its highest expression, using his limited time and energy not to retreat from the world, but to give it something it desperately needed: hope, inspiration, and representation. On Principle 4, the art of presence. Let me tell you something about time. Most people think they have plenty of it, so they let it slip away moment by moment, always living somewhere between yesterday and tomorrow. But when you know your time is measured, well, that's when you learn the true art of presence. And Chadwick Boseman, he mastered this art in a way that would have made the ancient Stoics stand in awe. You know, there's this powerful moment during the filming of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Denzel Washington, who produced the film, described watching Boseman perform a particularly intense scene. He said, "He wasn't acting, he was being." Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because what Denzel was describing wasn't just great acting, it was the essence of what the Stoics called living in accordance with nature, being fully present in each moment, regardless of what came before or what might come after. Consider this. During the filming of Black Panther, between takes, while others might rest or retreat to their trailers, Boseman would often stay on set, engaging with the crew, discussing the cultural significance of scenes, or mentoring younger actors. Despite the physical toll of his treatments, despite knowing his time was limited, he chose to be fully present in these moments. As his co-star Michael B. Jordan later shared, he was always present, always giving 100% of himself to every moment, every conversation. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. But Chadwick took this principle further. In his final years, he showed us that it's not just about how you react, but how fully you inhabit each moment you're given. During interviews promoting Black Panther, while secretly undergoing chemotherapy, he would spend extra time with young fans, fully engaged in their excitement, their hopes, their dreams. That's not just presence, that's presence with purpose. There's a particular story that illuminates this. During the 2018 Comic-Con, Boseman spent hours meeting with fans, many of them young children seeing their first black superhero. Despite his physical discomfort, those who were there describe him as being completely present for each interaction, as if nothing else in the world existed except that moment, that child, that connection. One parent later said, "He didn't just meet my son, he saw him." And that brings us to the deeper wisdom here. True presence isn't just about being physically there, it's about bringing your whole self to each moment, even when those moments are challenging. The Stoics believed that our power lies not in controlling what happens to us, but in how we show up for what life presents. Boseman embodied this truth every time he stepped onto a set, every interview he gave, every fan he met. Think about your own life for a moment. How often do you find yourself physically present but mentally elsewhere? How many moments slip by while you're planning for tomorrow or dwelling on yesterday? That's what makes Boseman's example so powerful. He showed us that presence isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a practical choice we can make in each moment, regardless of our circumstances. Principle 5. Legacy through action. You know what most people get wrong about legacy? They think it's about what you leave behind when you're gone. But let me tell you something about true legacy. It's about what you put into motion while you're here. And Chadwick Boseman understood this truth down to his bones. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." Now here's where Chadwick's story becomes particularly profound. Because in his final years, every choice he made, every role he took, every public appearance he made, was guided by a clear understanding of what would echo beyond his time. Consider this. When he was offered the role of T'Challa in Black Panther, Boseman was already aware of his diagnosis. He could have easily turned it down, focused on his health, retreated from the spotlight. Instead, he saw something bigger, an opportunity to create a cultural watershed moment that would inspire generations. As he said in his Howard University commencement speech, "Purpose crosses disciplines." Purpose is an essential element of you. It is the reason you are on the planet at this particular time in history. There's a scene in Black Panther where T'Challa speaks with his ancestors. It's a moment that takes on new meaning now, because what we were really watching was a man who knew he would soon join the ancestors, creating a legacy that would speak to future generations. Every gesture, every line delivery, every choice he made in that role was infused with this awareness. The Stoics taught that our actions should be guided not by the pursuit of fame or recognition, but by our commitment to virtue and the greater good. Boseman lived this principle through his careful choice of roles, from Jackie Robinson to Thurgood Marshall, from James Brown to T'Challa. Each character he portrayed wasn't just a performance. It was a vehicle for telling stories that needed to be told, for shifting cultural narratives, for inspiring change. And that brings us to something deeper. Legacy isn't just what we leave behind, it's what we build while we're here. During his last projects, even as his strength was failing, Boseman insisted on doing his own stunts whenever possible. When asked why, he said it wasn't about proving anything. It was about giving everything he had to the story, to the moment, to the legacy he was creating. The living philosophy of resilience. You know, as we come to the end of this story, it's worth remembering that what we've explored here isn't just about how one man faced his challenges. It's about how each of us can choose to live with purpose, regardless of what life throws our way. Through Chadwick's journey, we've uncovered truths that the Stoics knew centuries ago. that hidden strength often surpasses visible power, that our mortality, when properly understood, becomes our greatest teacher, that our deepest pain can give birth to our highest purpose. That true presence in each moment is the greatest gift we can give to ourselves and others. And that legacy isn't about what we leave behind, but what we set in motion while we're here. Let me tell you something about courage. It's not always about grand gestures or dramatic stands. Sometimes it's about showing up day after day, doing what needs to be done, serving a purpose larger than yourself. Chadwick showed us this kind of courage, not by announcing his battle to the world, but by continuing to create work that would inspire generations. The ancient Stoics taught that philosophy isn't just something you study, it's something you do. Chadwick Boseman might never have called himself a Stoic, but he lived these principles in a way that would have made Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus proud. He showed us that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about finding purpose in our challenges and meaning in our struggles. And that brings us to you. Because while none of us can choose all of our circumstances, we can all choose how we meet them. We can choose to let our challenges define us, or we can choose to let them refine us. We can choose to live in fear of what might come, or we can choose to live fully in each moment we're given. As you move forward from this story, remember, your legacy isn't something that begins when your story ends. It's something you're writing right now with every choice you make, every action you take, every moment you choose to be fully present for. In our next exploration, we'll delve into another modern example of ancient wisdom at work, discovering how timeless principles can guide us through contemporary challenges. Until then, remember what Chadwick showed us, that true power isn't in never falling, but in how we rise. Wakanda forever.